Welcome to 1500ESPN.com. My name is Andrew Krammer. I want to thank you for joining me as we go over three keys for the Minnesota Vikings to beat the Detroit Lions at Ford Field on Sunday. This will be the Vikings' fourth bid for an NFC North road win in Mike Zimmer's tenure. Obviously, they went 0-3 there last year. If you remember, the Vikings lost 16-14 to the Lions on December 14th, their last trip to Ford Field, where Blair Walsh went 0-3, getting a kick blocked, missing a kick, and then also obviously trying the desperation attempt from 68 yards. I don't anticipate this one to be as close on paper anyway. The Minnesota Vikings are a much better team. The Detroit Lions defense is not what it used to be. They've allowed oodles of points to many different offenses already, including 26 to the Vikings in Week 2 when the Vikings beat the Lions 26-16 on the back of Adrian Peterson. That brings us to our first point, where Mike Zimmer said this week, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And he said that in relation to, do you change much when you face a division opponent the second time around, especially this close, having only 3 games in between the last time they played the Lions. And you can read between the lines there and think, well, obviously you wouldn't need to fix what you did to beat the Lions in Week 2, which was run Adrian Peterson. Adrian had a season-high 29 carries in that game. He racked up 192 combined yards, obviously taking that flip pass, Brett Favre-like pass from Teddy Bridgewater for 58 yards in the first game, and then tacking on another 100-some yards on the ground. So I expect this to be an Adrian Peterson heavy game, as they try to do against Kansas City on Sunday, to no avail. But I expect Adrian to find a lot more room against this Lions defense that is allowing the most rushing touchdowns in the NFL, with 10, including 2 to the Vikings in Week 2. So I expect them to go back to what works with Adrian. Adrian has dominated the Lions in every single matchup. He has 12 career scores in 13 games, 1,300 rushing yards across those 13 games. He's absolutely dominated Detroit in every single outing, nearly every single outing, and I expect them to ride him again. But what they're going to need to do that, and that brings us to our second point, is extend drives. The Vikings have the second fewest drives, in the NFL, ahead of only Dallas, who has 51 drives. The Vikings have 53. Look at the stats, though. Why? They are 10th in the NFL in time of possession. They have one of the best running games in the NFL in terms of just volume, overall volume. Why can't they extend drives? Well, they're I believe they're 23rd in the NFL in third down offense. They're just unable to convert on those kind of drives. And at least on Sunday, and then even in Denver, their issues were the first and second down. They would end up putting themselves in third and long constantly and unable to convert those kinds. And a lot of it had to do with Adrian being stuffed on first, second down, and then all of a sudden you're facing a 3rd and 10, a 3rd and 8, and those are tough for any NFL offense to convert. So extend drives and then get into the red zone. They don't have many red zone drives. I had fielded an interesting inquiry from somebody on Twitter who was wondering, well, how are the Vikings doing in red zone efficiency? They don't seem to be doing too well. I went and looked it up, and they're not. they're 25th, I believe, in touchdowns per red zone drive. They're 22nd in scoring per red zone drive, so below average on all these marks in the NFL. But they only have 17 total red zone drives, which is ahead of only a few teams. Buffalo has the fewest in 12 red zone drives, and Cincinnati has the most in 28. So that's kind of the range right there, and the Vikings are pretty low in that at 17. They just need to extend drives and get into the red zone and get those chances. They have a great chance on Sunday against Detroit, who coincidentally is allowing the most red zone trips to all NFL offenses. They're allowing 30 trips through 6 games, which is the most. They've allowed 145 points in the red zone to NFL offenses, the most in the NFL. So the Vikings have a good chance to get Adrian Peterson back on track after 2 tough games against Kansas City and Denver, and to continue trying to get that red zone offense going and just creating more opportunities. Now, what is the third key? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep beating up Matthew Stafford. Do what you did in Week 2. They only had 1 sack on Stafford, but he ended up having 3 parts of his body x-rayed because of how beat up he was after that game. Anthony Barr, Everson Griffin, all these guys were able to just levy a lot of hits onto him. I believe they had 8 quarterback hits in that game, not counting the hits that they laid on him when he took off to run. So they were able to levy a lot of hits on him. Keep doing that. I fully expect cornerback Xavier Rhodes to shadow Calvin Johnson for the 3rd straight matchup. They've only faced each other twice in their career, and Xavier shadowed him both times. We talked to Calvin Johnson on a conference call this week, and Calvin said, yeah, that guy, he's pretty long, real grabby. And that's just kind of the kind of impression Xavier is leaving on the NFL, especially a star like Calvin Johnson. The past two matchups, Mike Zimmer has kind of deployed the same concept. Use Xavier to follow him around, and then use Harrison Smith over the top in important downs, more the third down kind of stuff where it's obvious they're going to be throwing the ball. So I expect the same kind of thing. I expect that kind of bracket coverage on Calvin Johnson. Now, Calvin did have a season-high 10 catches in that week, too, but he was large. I mean, 10 catches for 80-some yards, no score, or the one score. So they're fine with that if it means that's the only production this Lions offense is going to give. So the Vikings are probably going to continue that kind of trend. Hit Matthew Stafford. They might be without Sharif Floyd. Sharif Floyd hasn't practiced all week after a stellar game against Kansas City where he had 6 quarterback pressures. He's been banged up, might not play. Tom Johnson, though, is not a bad backup to have. There's a reason why they signed him to a 3-year deal in the offseason. They like what he brings to them, so he's not a bad backup at all. So even if they're without Sharif, they should still be able to get after Stafford and basically carry over the blueprint from what they did in week 2 into week 6 or 7, whatever, 7. This is going to be here on Sunday at Ford Field. So those are the 3 keys to recap. Keep running Adrian Peterson, extend those drives, get into the red zone because Detroit is giving up a lot of red zone points. And then on defense, hit Matthew Stafford, keep doing what you've been doing against a lot of quarterbacks. And this Vikings team should walk away 4-2 with their first road win in the Mike Zimmer era. That's what should happen. We'll see what actually happens on Sunday. I want to thank you guys for joining us again here at 1500ESPN.com. My name is Andrew Krammer. Check back to the website for more.